Hey everybody, this is John Halbach at Queerty, and I am joined today by Eric Cervini, the author of The Deviant's War, the Homosexual versus United States of America. Ta-da!
Ooh, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, Eric. Well, first things first, congratulations. This has got to be such a rare, huge feat for an LGBTQ history book to reach the New York Times bestseller list. What do you think about this book is resonating with people?
Well, yeah, it's been such an honor to be featured on the list and so many kind words from people. And I think what's resonating is so often people think of gay history and they think of it being dry. They think of, rainbow flags in the Supreme Court and legal cases, and that's it. And a lot of those stories start with Stonewall. And what people don't realize is that story of fighting for our rights really begins a full generation before Stonewall. So I think it's that mixture of really telling these human stories of some of these heroes who were fighting in the middle of the gay purges of the 1950s and 60s, people like Frank Kameny, people like Bayard Rustin, and the connection between the Black freedom movement and the gay rights movement. I think it's such an important conversation that we're having right now in this moment, especially considering our own successes and also the issue of Black Lives Matter right now. And I think a lot of people in the queer community are trying to figure out, all right, how do we do our part?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the book gets into such intricate detail with all of these stories. How did you launch into researching all of this? What drove you to uncover all these stories?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I first started the project as a history of the Mattachine Society of Washington, which was really the first gay rights organization in Washington, D.C. It was originally founded in 1950 by Harry Hay in Los Angeles and a group of communists. And then eventually Frank Kameny, who is I think, and many historians regard as the grandfather of the gay rights movement, he founded his own Mattachine Society of Washington. And he was really the first to do so many things. First to petition the Supreme Court for gay rights, first to demonstrate in front of the White House, first to testify in Congress as an openly gay man. And so he was really the starting point. And then I wanted to say, okay, what inspired him? How did he figure out what kinds of things to say, what strategies worked and what didn't? And what you find is he was consciously pulling from the Black freedom movement every single step of the way. So that's why I was really excited to also research not just his story, but people like Bayard Rustin, people like Ernestine Eppinger, and people within the Black freedom movement who really were giving us a template to figure out how we fight for ourselves. And so I think tracing those stories through his eyes, but also introducing a lot of other characters like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, and telling a wider story of America in the 1960s was something I really loved doing. But he certainly is, his cover or his photo is on the spine of the book. And so he's definitely kind of at the center of the story, but it's a much larger world that the book is about.
And did you have any favorite discoveries that you made as you were doing this research and uncovering these stories along the way?
Well, certainly the most shocking was the FBI surveillance and infiltration of the early gay rights movement. I think there's a lot of discussion about J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director's own sexuality, and even more than that, on top of that, was his own obsession with gay rights groups, including the Mattachine Society of Washington and Frank Kameny. And there's a 1,000-page FBI file on a very small organization of sexual deviants as they were trying to create change in Washington. J. Edgar Hoover was trying to infiltrate, trying to ruin the lives of the people in this group and other homosexuals in Washington. And so tracing how they were able to do that and how Hoover attempted really to destroy some of these early heroes was some of the most shocking parts of my research, and I think in the book too.
So cool. So the book is really a deep dive into what is still an ongoing fight for LGBTQ rights. Can you describe any parallels or similarities you might see going on between that struggle and the civil rights moment that we've really seen developing over the last few weeks?
Well, I think if there's anything that I hope people take away from the book, it's that gay rights did not just begin with Stonewall. we borrowed the entirety of what we now celebrate each June as Pride, whether it's gay pride, queer pride, trans pride. We borrowed that every step of the way from the Black freedom movement. And it's that process of how we translated Black power into gay power, Black is beautiful into gay is good, looking into the courts as a realm where we should be fighting. Every step of the way, we borrowed that from the Black freedom movement. And later, especially after Stonewall, the people who were the first to put their bodies on the line and fight, not just at Stonewall, but also on the streets for gay rights, marching, creating the Legal Action Committee and the Gay Activist Alliance. That was Sylvia Rivera. That was a trans person of color. And the book also shows how people like her, the most marginalized within our community, were the first to be forgotten. So I think right now, as we're trying to figure out, especially as cis gay white men, how we can do our part and be a part of this national conversation and be an agent for change, we need to look backwards to figure out how we went wrong and how we can do better this time around.
The Supreme Court just made a new ruling this week, making it illegal to discriminate against LGBTQ people in the workplace. And I was wondering, as this deviance war continues, do you have any plans for a sequel or an update to the book?
Well, I certainly need to update the epilogue because it ends with really a call to action to fight the continuing persecution, especially in the realm of employment. Up until this case, 28 states did not have any sort of protections for LGBTQ plus workers at the private level, at least. Now the question is, how will religious argumentation and religious rights play out with this case? I think we have to be prepared for a massive resistance throughout, the South and some of these red states who will most likely, as we saw with the marriage case, continue to flout the decision. So I think we need to be prepared for that, but we also need to be looking at who we've forgotten in this case and in this current battle. So looking at, youth homelessness, up to 40% of kids experiencing homelessness identify as queer. Black trans women are being murdered routinely, and it's something that we need to be discussing more. And so I hope people use the book to say, all right, this is an example of us forgetting people then. So now I want to be cognizant of how we're forgetting people now and how do we prevent similar mistakes as we made in the past.
So you've said in the past that one thing you've learned from your research is that pride, even before Stonewall, has always been synonymous with resistance. Are you seeing evidence of that this Pride season?
Absolutely. I think people have been asking, how do we celebrate Pride without the parades, without the floats, without the big parties? And I think you're seeing it right now. This past Sunday, 50,000 people were demonstrating for Black trans lives and declaring that they matter. And I think that is Pride. And I think that moment, that proclamation, that spirit of resistance and fighting back and fighting for the most marginalized is what we need to be bringing back every single year, right? The very first march for Pride was not a parade, it was a march of resistance. And it was a very scary thing to do, but they did it. And that's what I think we need to bring back now is say, okay, let's maybe keep the parades for Thanksgiving, and Pride is going to continue to be about fighting back and fighting for the most marginalized members of our family.
So true. This is such a challenging moment we found ourselves in, but also one that's really inspiring and exciting. And hopefully we're starting to see the beginning of some significant changes.
I think so.
Well, I want to say congratulations again. The book is fascinating and brilliant and sexy and fun to read. And I hope everyone will check it out this summer as they're building their summer reading lists.
Yes. Thank you so much for including me.
Thanks so much for chatting with us, Eric.
Sure thing. Take care.